Imagine pouring your life savings into restoring your dream home, only to come back a week later and find strangers living in it, claiming the HOA gave it to them. When Roland Pierce pulled up the gravel road leading to his mountain house, he expected silence, that peaceful stillness that had made him fall in love with the place. But instead, the first thing he saw was smoke. Not fog, not mist, smoke, curling from the chimney of the house he hadn't lived in yet. He sat there for a few seconds in his truck, the engine idling, eyes fixed on the thin line rising into the pale afternoon sky. His keychain jingled softly as he tightened his grip on the steering wheel. He knew that fireplace. He'd built it himself just 3 weeks ago. Something was wrong. The gate he'd installed, the one with the new black latch, was shut tight and padlocked. From the inside. That gate had only ever been locked from one side. His. Roland stepped out of the truck, boots crunching against the gravel. The air was sharp with that mix of pine and cold dirt that always hit him first thing up here. He looked around. Everything seemed familiar. The rocky driveway, the slope leading down to the creek. Except for one thing. A silver SUV parked next to his shed. He didn't recognize it. And there shouldn't have been anyone here. He'd left for Charlotte a week ago after wrapping up the final round of work. Floors sanded, walls painted, new cabinets in place. He was planning to bring his wife and son up the following weekend for the first real stay. He even left a bottle of champagne on the counter to celebrate. Now, that celebration felt miles away. Roland climbed over the gate and walked slowly toward the house, his phone in his hand but not recording. Not yet. The curtains he'd bought were drawn. The welcome mat was gone, replaced by something floral and frilly. "Hello?" he called out. No answer, just the faint sound of a TV somewhere inside. He took another step toward the porch, then stopped when he saw a pair of boots on the top step. Muddy, worn, definitely not his. "Hello?" he said again, louder this time. The front door opened halfway, and a woman's voice came through. "Can I help you?" Roland blinked, caught off guard. She looked to be in her 50s, with short blonde hair and a face that carried that kind of practiced authority you find at HOA meetings. "I'm sorry," Roland said. "Who are you?" "I live here," she replied, matter-of-factly, as if that should explain everything. "Who are you?" He tilted his head, trying to process what she'd just said. "You live here?" "Yes," she said, crossing her arms. "This property's been reassigned by the Homeowners Association. We've been trying to reach the owner for weeks." Roland frowned. "I am the owner." That made her pause, but only for a second. "No, sir," she said, voice clipped. "The previous deed holder forfeited this property due to abandonment. It's under temporary management until ownership can be verified." Roland let out a short, disbelieving laugh. "Ma'am, I just finished renovating this house." "You're standing on my porch. You're telling me you live here?" Before she could answer, a man appeared behind her, tall, heavy-set, with a baseball cap pulled low. He looked uncomfortable, like he knew this wasn't right, but didn't have the backbone to say it. "Colleen, maybe we should—" "No, Harold," she cut him off sharply. "We're not doing this again." "He's trespassing." Roland took a step back. "Trespassing? On my own property." He raised his phone now and hit record. "Can you say that again for me?" Her eyes narrowed. "You can record all you want, but until the HOA clarifies this, you can't be here. You need to leave." Roland pointed toward his truck. "My tools are in that shed. My paperwork's inside. My name is on the deed. I have the sale documents in my glove box." But she wasn't listening. She turned toward the living room and shouted, "Harold, close the door!" And he did. Roland stood there, stunned, watching the door shut in his face, the same door he had sanded, stained, and sealed with his own hands just a month ago. He could feel his pulse pounding in his neck. The audacity of it all. Strangers living in his home, speaking to him like he was the intruder. He called the sheriff's office. When the dispatcher answered, Roland explained everything as calmly as he could. The woman on the line said a deputy would come by. "Stay outside for now, sir," she advised. So he waited. The air grew colder as the minutes passed. He could hear muffled laughter from inside, plates clinking. the sound of a faucet running. They were making themselves comfortable in his home. Roland looked at the mountain ridge fading into the distance and wondered how this could even be happening. He'd worked 16-hour days restoring that place, scrubbing mold from the walls, hauling rotten boards out by hand, rewiring the entire electrical system. It wasn't just a property. It was the proof that hard work still meant something. But now, watching strangers occupy it like they owned it, something inside him hardened. He didn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning, the calm before everything spiraled out of control. The deputy's SUV pulled up almost 40 minutes later, its headlights cutting through the thinning daylight. Roland waved him down before the tires even stopped moving. Deputy Conrad, a middle-aged man with a salt-and-pepper mustache and an expression that suggested he'd rather be anywhere else, stepped out and looked around. "What seems to be the issue here, sir?" he asked, hand resting on his belt. Roland gestured toward the house. "There's a family living in my home. I just came back from Charlotte today. That's my property. I have the title, I have the paperwork, everything." The deputy squinted at the house. The curtains moved slightly. Someone was watching. "All right," Conrad said. "Let's just go talk to them." They walked up the porch together, and before the deputy could knock, the door opened again. The same woman, Colleen Densmore, stood there, her mouth tight, eyes sharp. This time she had her son with her. The boy looked to be maybe 16, lanky, wearing a hoodie with a private school logo on it. "Evening, ma'am," the deputy said politely. "I'm responding to a property dispute." Colleen nodded, standing tall. "Yes, officer, thank you for coming. This man has been harassing us and claiming ownership of a home that's under association management." Roland blinked. "Harassing you?" "I literally just got here." Colleen ignored him and turned back to the deputy. "We've contacted the HOA. They assured us that the deed was inactive. We moved in to maintain the property before it became a nuisance. We've been cleaning, repairing, keeping things safe." Roland stepped forward. "I've been renovating this house for months. You can check the county records. The deed is in my name, Roland Pierce. Closed on April 14th this year." Deputy Conrad looked from one to the other, visibly uncomfortable. "All right, let's slow down. Do either of you have documentation on hand?" Roland walked back to his truck, grabbed the manila folder from the glove box, and returned, holding it open. "Here. Bill of sale. Deed. Property tax receipt." The deputy took the papers and skimmed them. "Okay, these look legitimate." Colleen crossed her arms. "That doesn't mean anything until the HOA verifies it. There are still pending liens from before he purchased it. We've been told to oversee the property until it's resolved." "By who?" Roland asked. "You keep saying we, but I haven't seen a single official document from anyone." "By the board," she said simply, as if that settled it. Roland let out a slow, controlled breath. "Lady, there is no board for this parcel. This land sits outside your subdivision. You can't just assign yourself into someone's home." Her husband appeared behind her again, holding a cup of coffee, eyes downcast. "Maybe we should let him—" "Harold," she interrupted sharply. "Not now." The deputy exhaled through his nose. "All right, here's the situation," he said. "I'm not authorized to remove anyone from a property without a court order. This looks like a civil dispute. Mr. Pierce, you'll need to contact the county magistrate first thing Monday." Roland stared at him. "You're telling me they can just live here until then?" "I'm saying I can't remove them tonight. You can file a claim in the morning." Colleen smiled faintly. "See? There's a process, Mr. Pierce. I suggest you follow it." Roland turned toward her, disbelief etched across his face. "You broke into my house, changed my locks. You're cooking in my kitchen. That's not a dispute. That's breaking and entering." But the deputy didn't respond. He just gave that tired look people give when they've seen too many arguments and don't want to take sides. Colleen shrugged. "We didn't break in. The door was unlocked." Roland's jaw tightened. "Because I hadn't finished installing the deadbolt yet." The deputy closed his notebook. "Look, I understand this is frustrating, but I'm going to file a report, all right? Both of you will have copies. Let the court handle it." As the patrol car rolled away, the weight of it all hit Roland like a brick. He stood at the end of the driveway, watching the taillights disappear, feeling like the ground beneath him had just shifted. He called his wife, Marlene, who was still in Charlotte. "You're not going to believe this," he said, voice low, almost whispering. "There's a family living inside our house." "What? What are you talking about?" she asked. "Like squatting?" "Worse," he said. "They think they have the right to be here. The deputy wouldn't even make them leave." He could hear her pacing through the phone. "You need to call a lawyer tonight. Don't stay there alone." "I'm not leaving," he said. "Not until I figure this out." He hung up and sat on the tailgate of his truck, the sky above him fading from blue to grey. He could see movement inside the house, silhouettes crossing in front of the window, the flash of a TV screen, the faint sound of laughter. It was his house, but it didn't feel like it anymore. He pulled out his phone and opened the camera. "This is day one," he said quietly into the lens. "I'm documenting everything." Behind him, the mountains stretched endlessly, silent witnesses to a situation that made no sense. But Roland knew one thing. This wasn't ending tonight. Tomorrow, he'd make sure the right people saw what was happening, and the truth would start catching up to everyone inside that house. The next morning came with fog sitting low over the ridge, and Roland hadn't slept a minute. He spent the night in his truck, parked at the bottom of the driveway, the engine off, but his thoughts running wild. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw that woman's face, calm, smug, standing in his doorway like she'd been born to it. At sunrise, Roland got out, stretched his legs, and looked toward the house. The chimney was quiet now. No smoke, but the silver SUV was still there. He walked closer, camera in hand, narrating softly into the phone. "It's 7:32 a.m., Saturday. They're still inside. This is my property, purchased April 14th. They're squatting illegally." Before he could reach the porch, the door swung open. Colleen stepped out, wearing a robe and holding a coffee mug like she was greeting a neighbor, not the man whose life she'd just turned upside down. "You're still here?" she said, voice full of mock surprise. Roland steadied his phone. "You didn't leave my house, so yes, I'm still here." Colleen smiled, that kind of smile that hides irritation. "Mr. Pierce, I already told you. Until the HOA resolves this, you don't have any right to occupy this property." Roland lowered his phone. "You realize how ridiculous that sounds, right? You're saying a homeowners association has more authority than the state of North Carolina." "This isn't North Carolina," she said quickly. "It's South Carolina jurisdiction up here." Roland blinked. "Lady, we're standing in Avery County, North Carolina. The state line's 30 miles south." Her husband, Harold, came to the doorway, scratching his head. "Colleen, maybe we should talk to someone." But she turned on him. "No, we're doing the right thing. The board asked for volunteers, and I'm not backing down just because this man raises his voice." Roland took a step closer. "No board asked you for anything. You found an abandoned house, thought no one would check, and moved yourselves in. You don't even realize how crazy that sounds." She bristled. "You can't talk to me that way. I'm trying to protect the neighborhood. You can't just buy land here and think you don't have responsibilities to the community." "I do have responsibilities," he said. "But they don't include letting you steal my home." The door opened wider, and their teenage son, Gavin, appeared behind his father. He looked uncomfortable, almost embarrassed. "Mom," he muttered, "maybe we should just go." "Go where?" she snapped. "We've put work into this place already." Roland couldn't believe his ears. "Work? You mean repainting over my kitchen cabinets and taking down my fixtures? You changed my locks, Colleen. That's called securing a property," she said sharply. "It was for everyone's safety." He stared at her, speechless for a moment. "You broke into my home and think you're doing me a favor?" Colleen crossed her arms. "We'll see who the court believes." Roland exhaled hard, shaking his head. "You know what? Fine. Keep talking." He lifted his phone again and panned it toward the door. "This is the Densmore family, illegally occupying my property. They've changed the locks and claim an HOA reassignment." Colleen's eyes flickered with something, maybe fear, maybe anger, but she held her ground. "If you post that online, you'll regret it," she warned. He didn't respond. He just kept recording, walking slowly around the porch, documenting every little detail: the floral welcome mat, the new house number sign she'd hung, the wind chime that definitely hadn't been there before. By mid-morning, a few neighbors had shown up, drawn by the noise. One of them, an older man named Royce Bell, stood by the road holding a thermos, trying to make sense of it all. "What's going on here?" he asked. Roland explained everything: how he'd bought the house months ago, fixed it up himself, and came back to find strangers inside. Royce looked between Roland and Colleen, then rubbed his chin. "Yeah, that's her for you," he muttered. "She tried to fine me last year for painting my shutters the wrong shade of green, who has been her little kingdom since her husband retired." Harold's face turned red. "Hey now, we're just following the rules." "What rules?" Roland shot back. "You made them up." Colleen glared at Royce. "You don't speak for the association, Royce. You've been in violation since you built that shed." "Lady," he said, shaking his head, "I built that shed 20 years ago. You moved here 6 years ago and started acting like sheriff. The argument drew more people out. A couple of curious hikers from down the road stopped to watch, phones out, whispering. Roland noticed them and didn't mind. The more eyes on this, the better. He pointed toward the driveway. "You see that? That's my name on the mailbox. My signature on the property marker. You can check the county assessor's website right now. This parcel doesn't fall under any HOA." Colleen turned toward the crowd, her voice rising. "Don't believe everything you read online." "The county hasn't updated their records yet." Royce laughed under his breath. "You've lost it, Colleen." The tension hung heavy. For a second, nobody spoke. Then Roland broke the silence. "You've got 1 hour to pack your things. After that, I'm calling my lawyer and filing a trespass report." Colleen didn't flinch. "You'll regret that." Roland looked her dead in the eye. "No, Mom, I think you will." He turned away, his hands shaking slightly. Not from fear, but from the sheer absurdity of what he was living through. The camera was still rolling, and this time he planned to make sure everyone saw what was happening. But as Roland was about to learn, Colleen Densmore wasn't finished. Not by a long shot. She was about to pull the one stunt that would turn a bad situation into a full-blown war. By noon, Roland's video had already spread across social media. A friend from Charlotte shared it on a local community page, and before long, strangers were leaving comments, some offering legal advice, others doubting the story altogether. But Roland didn't have time to scroll through opinions. His focus was on getting help. He had already called his lawyer, Anthony Riles, a property rights attorney based in Asheville. Anthony promised to drive up that afternoon, but he also warned Roland not to escalate anything until he got there. "Let the law do the work," he said over the phone. "You're in the right, but don't give them a reason to twist the story." Roland agreed, though patience wasn't easy when trespassers were eating breakfast in your kitchen. Around 1 p.m, a different patrol car pulled into the driveway, this time 2 deputies, both younger than the first one from the night before. Their names were Deputy Hernandez and Deputy Lowell. They walked up the path side by side, hands near their belts, surveying the situation. Roland greeted them halfway up. "Officers, I'm glad you're here. I've got the deed, the title. Everything ready. These people broke into my home." "All right, sir," Hernandez said calmly. "Why don't we hear from both sides before we make a call?" Colleen appeared in the doorway again. Same robe, same smugness, as if she'd been waiting for the perfect audience. "Officers," she said with a polite smile, "thank you for coming. We're the Densmore family. The association board has temporarily reassigned this property to our care due to safety concerns. There's been confusion with ownership, but we're cooperating." Lowell raised a brow. "You have documentation for that?" Colleen disappeared inside and returned with a neat folder. Printed emails, meeting minutes, even a fake-looking property management authorization, stamped with something that looked like an HOA logo. Roland crossed his arms. "None of that is legal. That's a neighborhood committee from a subdivision half a mile away. This property isn't part of it." Hernandez flipped through the pages, frowning. "These don't look like official county documents." "They're not," Roland said quickly. "Here, this is." He handed over his certified deed and bill of sale. "Check the parcel number. It's outside their jurisdiction." Colleen's expression twitched. "He's twisting the facts." The association extends beyond the subdivision lines. We've had several abandoned lots. Roland interrupted. It wasn't abandoned. I've been working on it for months. There are pictures, receipts, everything. Lowell sighed, glancing at his partner. This is one of those civil grey zones, he muttered. Roland's patience snapped. Grey zone? They're living in my house. Inside, Harold appeared again, holding a dish towel. Look, we didn't mean any harm. We just thought... Thought what? Roland shot back. That you could just move into someone else's home. Colleen turned to her husband. Stop apologizing, Harold. He's trying to intimidate us. Hernandez stepped between them. All right, everyone. Take a breath. Nobody's getting physical here. We're going to write a report. But unless we have a clear court order, we can't remove them today. Roland clenched his jaw. So they get to stay? For now, Lowell said. You'll have to file for a writ of possession with the magistrate. That's the process. Colleen looked almost pleased with herself. You see, Mr. Pierce, it's not as simple as you think. Roland turned away, pacing in disbelief. He could feel every muscle in his body tensing. This is insane, he muttered. You're letting squatters live in my home. The deputies didn't reply. They handed him a card with a case number and told him the sheriff's office would follow up after the weekend. As they were leaving, Hernandez lowered his voice. I believe you, man, he said quietly. But keep everything documented. Every minute Roland nodded, swallowing hard. I've got plenty of footage. When the patrol car disappeared down the hill, Colleen stepped back onto the porch, her voice full of mock sympathy. Tough break, huh? Bureaucracy's a pain. Roland stared at her, speechless for a moment. You really don't get it, do you? This is theft. You're criminals. Colleen's tone sharpened. Careful with your words, Mr. Pierce. You wouldn't want to sound threatening on video. That comment sent a chill through him. She was planning something. Setting him up, maybe. He could see it in her eyes. She wasn't just confident, she was calculated. He backed away slowly, raising his phone again. Keep talking, Colleen. Every word counts. She smiled, turned around, and closed the door with a deliberate click. By late afternoon, more neighbors began showing up, drawn by curiosity or gossip. Cars lined the roadside. Some people waved sympathetically at Roland, others avoided eye contact. A few whispered things he couldn't quite hear. He heard someone say, "You know how people are when outsiders buy up property." That word, outsider, stuck in his head like a splinter. He stayed near the gate, pacing, waiting for Anthony to arrive. When the black sedan finally pulled up around 5, Roland nearly exhaled in relief. Anthony stepped out, sleeves rolled up, carrying a briefcase. "All right," he said, scanning the scene. "Let's go make this right." But when they walked toward the house together, something new caught their eye. A paper taped to the front door, fluttering in the breeze. Whatever it said, Roland could tell from the lawyer's expression that things were about to get worse before they got better. The paper on the door was printed in bold letters. Notice of temporary occupancy. Authorized by Ridge Valley Hoa Board. Anthony tore it off and handed it to Roland, his eyes scanning the page. "This isn't a legal document," he said flatly. "It's just a letterhead someone made on a home printer. No county seal, no case reference, nothing." Roland ran a hand over his face. "So they just made it up?" Anthony nodded. "Yeah, this is theater. They're trying to stall you, hoping you'll lose your temper or back off." From inside, Colleen's voice carried through the open window. "You can take that down, but it won't change anything." "The board has authority." Anthony raised his voice slightly. "Mrs. Densmore, this isn't up for debate. You're trespassing on private property. You and your family need to vacate immediately before this becomes criminal." Her husband appeared behind the curtains, shifting uncomfortably. "We don't want any trouble," Harold said. "We were told—" "By who?" Anthony cut him off. "Because whoever told you this was legal gave you very bad advice." Colleen came to the window and leaned out. "We're not discussing this through glass, counselor. You can call whoever you like, but we're not moving until this is clarified in writing." Roland's patience snapped. "It is in writing. It's in the deed. In my name." Anthony put a hand on Roland's shoulder. "Let me handle this." Then to Colleen, calm but firm. You're not covered under any law that allows you to occupy someone else's home. The HOA has no legal authority here. You're setting yourselves up for a criminal charge. Colleen's tone turned cold. We'll see what the sheriff says Monday. And she pulled the curtains shut. Anthony sighed. We'll file for an emergency writ first thing, but we need witnesses. Someone credible who saw all this as if on cue. A pickup truck rolled up the hill, followed by another. Within minutes, a small group of neighbors had gathered at the end of the drive. Word had spread quickly, probably thanks to Roland's video circulating online. One of the first to approach was Royce Bell, the older man who'd spoken up the day before. You're not going to believe this, he told Anthony. Half the folks down the valley think Colleen's doing some kind of community service project. She's been calling it a temporary restoration effort. Roland's eyes widened. She's spinning this? Oh, she's not just spinning it, Royce said. She's been telling everyone you're an out-of-state investor trying to flip old homes for profit, that she's protecting local heritage. Anthony shook his head. Classic manipulation tactic. She's trying to turn public opinion. Another neighbor, a woman in her 60s named Dolores Hinton, chimed in. I live 2 houses down from her. She's been bragging about this for days. Said she was taking back the mountains from developers. I told her she was crazy. But you know Colleen. She thinks she's the sheriff of Ridge Valley. Anthony took down names and phone numbers. Would you both be willing to make statements? Gladly, Dolores said. She's gone too far this time. While they talked, Roland noticed more cars pulling over. Some folks watched quietly, phones in hand. A few looked at him like he was the problem. He could hear whispers, fragments of sentences carried by the breeze. Did he really buy it? Colleen said he forged papers. She's just trying to keep order. Roland's stomach churned. He wasn't just fighting for his property anymore. He was fighting against a narrative. Then, out of nowhere, a tall man in a red windbreaker stepped forward. Name's Brett Colson, he said. I'm on the HOA board. Maybe we can talk this out? Anthony raised an eyebrow. Talk it out? Your people broke into my client's home. Brett shifted uneasily. Look, I didn't approve this. Colleen's persistent, but she convinced a few members that the place was neglected and could attract vagrants. They didn't mean for it to get this far. Roland stepped closer. Didn't mean for it to get this far? There's paint on my walls I didn't choose. My locks are changed. My fridge is full of someone else's groceries. I understand, Brett said quietly. She overstepped. Then say that on camera, Roland said, lifting his phone. Brett hesitated, glancing toward the house. I can't do that, not yet. But I'll talk to the others. Anthony frowned. You should do it sooner rather than later, because once I file charges, the entire board's going to be named. Brett swallowed and turned back toward his truck. I'll see what I can do. As the crowd started thinning, Dolores walked closer to Roland. You did nothing wrong, son. People like her thrive on control. Don't let her rattle you. Roland gave a tired nod. I just want my house back. Dolores smiled sadly. You will. But folks like her, they don't back down easy. Not until someone forces them to. By sunset, most of the neighbors had gone home, leaving the mountain road quiet again. Roland sat on his tailgate beside Anthony, the sound of insects filling the air. The house lights glowed faintly through the window. Someone was cooking dinner. Anthony closed his briefcase. Tomorrow we go to the magistrate. Once the court order's in, they'll have no choice but to leave. Just hold on a little longer. Roland nodded, staring at the house. His house, silhouetted against the dying light. I've held on for months building it, he said quietly. I can hold on a little longer to get it back. But overnight, the story would spread beyond the mountains. And by morning, the entire state would know about the man who came home to find strangers living in his house, and not everyone would be on his side. Before all this chaos, before the patrol cars, the crowds, and the endless arguments, the mountain house had been Roland's dream. It wasn't just another property to flip or a getaway to brag about. It was supposed to be the place where his family could finally breathe. For most of his adult life, Roland had lived surrounded by noise, contractors calling at all hours, machinery humming on work sites, deadlines chasing him like shadows. He restored old homes for a living, breathing life into what other people had given up on. His father used to say, "Some folks see dust and decay, son." You see, that memory kept him going. When his father passed 5 years earlier, Roland promised himself he'd build something lasting, something that wasn't for a client or a paycheck, something with his own name on the deed. He started searching for properties across the Carolinas, mostly old farmhouses or forgotten estates, the kind that looked beyond saving. Then, one January morning, while scanning listings over coffee, he found it. A weathered house tucked deep in the Blue Ridge Range, just outside Boone, North Carolina. The pictures looked bleak. Boarded windows, collapsed porch, overgrown driveway. But the structure, he could see the bones beneath the ruin. He drove up that weekend. The road was rough, cutting through switchbacks and patches of fog. But when he reached the top, something about the silence hit him. It wasn't lifeless. It was waiting. The property had belonged to a retired teacher who passed away nearly 10 years earlier. Her distant relatives never claimed it, and the land sat untouched. The locals called it the widow's house, and most avoided it. But Roland didn't see ghosts. He saw potential. He bought it within a month. Every Friday after work, he'd load his pickup with tools, plywood, and paint, then drive 3 hours up to the mountain. He slept on an air mattress in the living room, wrapped in a sleeping bag, with the wind howling through broken windows. At first it was exhausting. The place had no power, no running water, and a roof that leaked like a sieve. But he worked through it, patching shingles, tearing out rotten beams, rewiring the fuse box. One afternoon, his wife, Marlene, came up to help. She stood on the porch, watching him sand the front door. "You really think this place can come back?" she asked. Roland smiled, sweat streaking down his face. "It's already coming back. You just can't see it yet." Their son, Caleb, visited once, too. 15 and more interested in his phone than in old wood and sawdust. But even he had smiled when they lit the fireplace that first night. "Smells like a cabin," he said, half asleep under a pile of blankets. That small moment, his boy's head resting against his arm, was the one Roland kept coming back to. The house wasn't just wood and nails. It was proof that something neglected could be rebuilt, piece by piece, with patience and care. By early spring, the house had transformed. New floors gleamed under the light. The old oak beams stood proud again. He replaced the cracked stone steps with handmade cedar ones and stained them by hand. Every inch of that place carried his fingerprints. He imagined summers spent grilling on the porch, winters by the fire, and quiet mornings when the world finally stopped asking him for something. Then came the final weekend before he left for Charlotte to finish a big restoration project downtown. He swept the floors, locked the gate, and stood at the driveway, taking one last photo on his phone. The caption he posted online read, "Hardest project of my life, but worth every drop of sweat." He didn't know it would become evidence later. While he was gone that week, neighbors must have noticed the silence. Maybe that's when Colleen saw an opportunity. She'd probably driven by, seen the fresh paint, and convinced herself someone had abandoned it mid-project. To her, it wasn't a home. It was a power move waiting to happen. Anthony had warned him during their first call, "People like her, they don't just want control. They need it. It's not about property lines, it's about pride." Now, sitting in his truck with a cold cup of coffee, Roland thought back to every nail he'd hammered, every hour he'd worked to make that house whole again. It felt like all that labor was being mocked, as if the sweat of his hands meant nothing compared to someone else's false sense of authority. He scrolled through his old photos, each one time-stamped, each one proof of what he'd built. The memory of that first fire crackling in the hearth hit harder than he expected. He could still hear the laughter from that night, echoing faintly in his mind. He didn't just want his house back, he wanted the peace it represented. But the peace he built was about to crumble even faster than the old walls he'd once repaired, because the next morning, Colleen Densmore was going to make her boldest move yet, one that would turn a bad story into a national scandal. By Monday morning, the mountain didn't feel like Roland's sanctuary anymore. It felt like a battleground. What had once been quiet land filled with promise was now crawling with reporters, curious locals, and drones hovering above the tree line. The story had caught fire overnight, spreading across social media faster than he could keep up. "Man buys abandoned home, finds strangers living inside," one headline read. Another added, "HOA war in the Blue Ridge. Who really owns the mountain house?" Anthony's phone didn't stop buzzing as they drove to the magistrate's office in Boone. "I've got 3 journalists asking for statements," he said. "Don't say anything until I've filed." The internet can twist a sentence faster than a lawyer can fix it. Roland leaned against the passenger window, eyes fixed on the winding road. "I didn't want any of this. I just wanted my place back. I know," Anthony said quietly. "But you're in it now. We'll handle it the right way." The courthouse clerk processed the filing that morning. Anthony submitted the deed, photographs of the renovations, and screenshots of the fake HOA letter Colleen had taped to the door. By noon, the magistrate signed a temporary writ of possession, giving law enforcement the power to remove anyone unlawfully occupying the property. When Roland held that paper in his hands, he finally felt a spark of relief. "So this means," Anthony nodded, "it means you're about to get your house back." They drove straight back up the mountain, the tires crunching over gravel as the house came into view. The silver SUV was still parked out front, but there was something new. A large wooden sign staked in the yard, painted with bold black letters. It read, "Community Restoration Project, Protected Property." Roland hit the brakes so hard the truck jolted forward. "You've got to be kidding me." Anthony stared at the sign, disbelief etched across his face. She doubled down. They got out and walked toward the porch. The door was open, and inside, Roland could hear voices. Not just Colleen's family this time, but others. 2 women were rearranging furniture. A man was painting near the window, and Colleen stood in the center, clipboard in hand, giving orders. "Colleen!" Roland shouted, storming up the steps. "What the hell are you doing?" She turned calmly, as if she'd been expecting him. "Oh, Mr. Pierce. We're preparing for inspection. This property has been approved as part of a community housing initiative." Anthony stepped forward. "Approved by who?" "By the Ridge Valley Board," she replied, smiling like a politician. "We had a special session last night." Anthony pulled the writ from his briefcase and held it out. "You can save your rehearsed speech, Mrs. Densmore. This is a court order. You are to vacate the premises immediately." For the first time, her expression faltered. "That's impossible. We're within our rights." "No," Roland said, voice steady but sharp. "You're in my house, with my furniture, holding a meeting about my property." Harold, standing by the kitchen doorway, looked at the paper in Anthony's hand and took a step back. "Colleen, maybe we should go." "We're not leaving," she hissed under her breath. Anthony signaled toward the deputy's vehicle that had just pulled up behind them. 2 uniformed officers stepped out, Hernandez and Lowell again, this time looking far more decisive. "Afternoon, folks," Hernandez said. "We've got a court order. Everyone not listed on the deed needs to vacate the property immediately." The room went still. The people helping Colleen froze mid-step. One of the women dropped her paint roller. Colleen's voice trembled slightly now. "This isn't over. We're filing an appeal." "You're free to do that," Anthony said, "from outside the property." Lowell handed her a copy of the writ. "You have 1 hour to remove your belongings. After that, anything left inside will be considered abandoned." Roland stood in the doorway, watching as the illusion cracked. Colleen's composure, that mask of self-importance, started to fade. Harold quietly began gathering boxes. Their son, Gavin, looked mortified, avoiding everyone's eyes as he packed up clothes from the guest room. Outside, a few neighbors had gathered again, whispering among themselves. Some were filming on their phones, others shaking their heads in disbelief. Royce Bell stood near the gate, arms crossed. "About time," he muttered, loud enough for Colleen to hear. Colleen spun toward him. "You all think this is funny? You'll regret siding with him. This changes everything around here." Roland met her glare. "You already changed everything, Colleen." You turned good neighbors into witnesses." She looked like she wanted to respond, but words failed her. For a brief moment, the control she clung to for years slipped away. When the deputies escorted the Densmores out an hour later, Colleen still tried to keep her chin high, but her eyes were glassy. Not from remorse, but from humiliation. Harold carried the last of their boxes, his shoulders sagging. Anthony turned to Roland, resting a hand on his arm. "It's over." Roland nodded, though part of him didn't believe it yet. "It doesn't feel over." Anthony looked toward the mountain ridge. "Give it time. Truth has a way of catching up to people, but the truth was about to catch up faster than anyone expected, because before the day was done, footage from the eviction would hit the internet, and Colleen Densmore would go from neighborhood tyrant to national headline. The eviction itself felt like watching a slow collapse, not of a building, but of a person who had built their entire identity on being right. By the time the deputies started escorting the Densmores off the property, several vehicles had lined the shoulder of the mountain road. Locals leaned against hoods, murmuring, cameras in hand. Someone was live streaming from across the fence, narrating as if it were a reality show. Roland didn't care about the crowd. His focus stayed on the house. His house. Inside, the air smelled different. Traces of someone else's perfume, coffee gone cold, and new paint that didn't belong. The furniture had been rearranged, his curtains replaced, and one of his handmade cedar steps now had a deep gouge where something heavy had been dragged across it. Deputy Hernandez turned toward him. "We'll do a final sweep once they're clear. Make sure nothing's left that shouldn't be." Roland nodded, jaw tight. "Thank you." Outside, Colleen stood near the silver SUV, arms folded, lips pressed tight. Her son sat in the back seat, head bowed, earbuds in, pretending not to exist. Harold moved slower, loading boxes into the trunk one by one. Photo frames, kitchen utensils, even food from the fridge. Anthony stood a few yards away, silent, watching everything with the measured patience of a man who'd seen justice crawl on its knees before. Colleen finally turned toward Roland. "You didn't have to humiliate us like this." Roland stared at her, incredulous. "You humiliated yourself when you moved into someone else's home." She took a step forward. "You don't understand how things work up here. People look out for their community. You're not part of it. You never were." Roland's voice stayed calm, but his eyes hardened. "I wasn't part of your community because I was busy building something honest. You walked in and decided it belonged to you." Her lips trembled slightly, though she masked it with anger. "This is going to ruin us. You think anyone's going to side with a man who turned an old mountain neighborhood into a circus?" Anthony stepped in before Roland could respond. "Mrs. Densmore, you've already done that yourself. You staged a fake HOA operation and broke the law. You're lucky we're handling this civilly." Colleen's cheeks flushed red. She looked around, at the neighbors filming, at the deputies watching, at her husband loading the last box, and for the first time, her confidence cracked. Harold placed the final box in the trunk, then turned to her. "Colleen, let's go." His voice wasn't firm, but it had weight. The tone of a man who'd finally reached his limit. She opened her mouth to argue, but no words came. She got into the passenger seat without another glance at Roland. The SUV started, rolled down the gravel drive, and disappeared behind the trees. Silence. It wasn't triumphant. It wasn't even peaceful. It was heavy, like the quiet that follows a long argument where no one really wins. Roland stepped inside for the first time in weeks. The sound of his boots on the wood floors echoed strangely, as if the house itself was exhaling. He walked from room to room, checking the damage. The kitchen counters were chipped. The pantry was nearly empty. A vase he'd bought for Marlene was shattered in the sink. He found his champagne bottle too, the one he'd left on the counter for his family's first night here. The cork had been popped, half the liquid gone. Someone had even written on the label in marker, "Welcome to the neighborhood." His chest tightened. It wasn't just property they'd violated. It was his sense of home. Anthony followed him inside. "We'll catalogue everything," he said softly. "You'll get restitution for the damages." Roland shook his head. "Money won't fix this." "I know," Anthony said. "But it's a start." They walked through the house together. Roland opened the back door to let fresh air in, staring out over the trees that stretched for miles. The light caught the ridge just right, and for the first time in days, he saw the view that had made him fall in love with this place. It was still there, untouched by all the noise and nonsense. Anthony spoke again. "You did everything right, Roland. You stayed calm, followed the law. You'll come out of this with your name clear." Roland nodded slowly. "Yeah, but look what it took to prove I belonged in my own home." Anthony didn't answer. There wasn't anything to say to that. They finished their walkthrough, locking the doors behind them. Hernandez handed Roland a final report to sign. "We'll keep patrols nearby for a few days, just in case she tries something." "Appreciate that," Roland said quietly. As the deputies left, the sun dipped low behind the ridge. The house was finally his again, but it didn't feel like victory. It felt like something had been taken from him that no court could ever return. He stood at the porch railing, phone in hand, looking at the endless trail of comments still pouring in online. Some praised him for standing his ground. Others accused him of exaggerating. A few even sided with Colleen, calling her a protector of community values. He scrolled through them for a minute, then turned the phone off. The world could argue all it wanted. He'd lived the truth. He looked at the darkening sky and whispered, "You're home, old house. No one's taking you again." But even as peace began to return, the story wasn't finished. Because by the next morning, national news outlets would pick up the footage, and Roland would find himself dragged into a storm far beyond his mountain ridge. By Tuesday morning, Roland's name was everywhere. News anchors, podcasts, YouTube commentators, everyone wanted a piece of the story. What began as a small property dispute in the mountains had exploded into a national talking point. Headlines flashed across screens. "Homeowner finds family living in his renovated cabin. Sparks debate on property rights." HOA gone wild. Couple evicted after claiming authority over man's home. Even tabloids ran with it, twisting the story into something theatrical. When Roland woke up, his phone had over 200 missed calls and messages. Marlene called first. "You're on TV, Ro. CNN, Fox, everything. They're showing the video." Roland rubbed his eyes. "Which one?" "The one from the eviction. The one where that woman, Colleen, called the deputies corrupt. Somebody uploaded the whole thing. It's everywhere." He sighed, sitting up on the couch. He hadn't even slept in his bedroom. It still felt tainted somehow, like someone else's breath still lingered in the walls. "I didn't post that," he said quietly. "I know," Marlene said. "But people are reposting it. Everyone's talking about how calm you stayed. Some folks are calling you a hero." He gave a faint, humorless chuckle. "A hero for getting robbed of my own house. That's rich." Marlene hesitated. "I think you should come home for a few days. Let this die down." "I can't," he said. "Not yet." Outside, another car pulled up. Anthony stepped out, carrying a small stack of legal folders. His expression told Roland what he already suspected. The situation wasn't over. "They filed a complaint," Anthony said, setting the folders on the porch table. "Colleen's claiming wrongful eviction. Says you used forged paperwork." Roland blinked. "She's doubling down?" "She's desperate," Anthony said. "Her reputation's in flames. She's trying to save face. But don't worry. It's not going anywhere. We've got certified records, timestamps, even footage from the deputies' body cams." Roland leaned back in his chair. "I almost feel sorry for her." Almost Anthony gave a half smile. "She did this to herself. But the court of public opinion, that's another story." He wasn't kidding. By mid-afternoon, the internet had split in half. On one side were the people defending Roland, applauding his composure, calling the situation the perfect example of modern entitlement. On the other were those sympathizing with the Densmores, claiming they'd been victims of misleading property laws. One viral tweet read, "This is what happens when rich developers buy land and push locals out." She was standing up for her town. Roland wasn't rich, and he certainly wasn't a developer, but the truth didn't matter online. It never did. Later that day, Anthony called with an update. The county DA reviewed the case. They're not filing criminal charges against the Densmores yet, but there's an investigation into whether they forged any documents. Roland's voice hardened. You mean that fake notice she taped to my door? Exactly, Anthony said. If she falsified a legal document, she's in trouble. Meanwhile, a reporter from Asheville called asking for an interview. Then another from Raleigh. Then Inside Edition. Roland turned them all down. He didn't want his life to become entertainment, but the world didn't care about what he wanted. It cared about clicks. He stepped outside that evening, watching the sun bleed orange over the tree line. The house stood quiet again, the way it was meant to be. But even in that peace, there was an odd emptiness, a silence that didn't comfort him anymore. His phone buzzed again, a message from Dolores Hinton, the neighbor who had spoken up for him. You did the right thing, Roland. Most people would have given up. We're proud of you. He stared at that message for a long time before typing back, Thanks, Dolores. I just wish it hadn't come to this. The next morning, Colleen Densmore appeared on local news, standing outside a lawyer's office in a pale blue dress, claiming she'd been misrepresented and that she was acting in good faith. Her voice trembled slightly, but her confidence was still there. I was protecting the integrity of our community, she said into the camera. I was misled by incorrect information about that property's status. The interviewer asked, Do you regret your actions? Colleen hesitated. I regret that this became public. I regret that people misunderstood my intentions. Not once did she say she was wrong. That evening, Roland watched the clip on his laptop. He could feel his anger bubbling again, not because she lied, but because she still believed she was right. Anthony called a few minutes later. She's done, he said. Her appeal won't hold. The HOA board is distancing themselves. She's out. Roland stared at the empty living room, where sunlight stretched across the floorboards he'd polished himself. You think she'll ever admit it? Anthony paused. No. Some people can't face being wrong. They just move the goalposts. Roland nodded slowly. Then I guess she'll have to live with that. I've got a house to put back together. He hung up, grabbed a broom, and started cleaning. Each sweep across the floor felt like reclaiming a piece of his peace. But even as the world began to move on, Roland couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about a house. It was about something deeper. Something broken in the way people treat what isn't theirs. And it would stay with him long after the cameras were gone. Weeks later, the house no longer felt violated. The scent of fresh wood and varnish had replaced the stale odor of intrusion. The gouged step had been repaired, the shattered vase replaced. The champagne bottle, though empty, now sat cleaned on a shelf, a reminder of both how fragile and how strong ownership could be. Roland had decided to stay for a while. No contractors, no clients, no deadlines. Just him. The sound of the wind through the trees and the steady rhythm of his breathing as he worked his way back to peace. In those first quiet mornings, he realized something strange. The more he cleaned, the less angry he felt. Each nail driven back in place, each wall wiped down, took a little of the bitterness out of him. The anger hadn't been about property. Not really. It had been about the feeling of being erased, of watching something he built with care get claimed by someone who had no part in it. He'd talked to Anthony a few times since the ordeal. The lawyer said the case had wrapped up. The Densmores were ordered to pay restitution and banned from the HOA board for falsifying documents. Harold had apparently moved out of state to live near his brother. Colleen, on the other hand, had stayed in Ridge Valley. Though she'd gone quiet, her once frequent HOA updates vanished from community boards. I doubt she'll ever apologize, Anthony said during their last call. I don't need one, Roland replied. I just want my peace back. The words were simple, but they stuck with him. Peace wasn't something anyone could give him. It was something he had to reclaim. Sometimes at sunset, he'd walk down the gravel path toward the creek and sit on the large stone by the bend. From there, he could see the reflection of the house in the water, a small, flickering image surrounded by trees that never cared who owned them. It reminded him of how fragile control really was. He thought a lot about the people who'd sided with Colleen online, strangers who had never met him, who decided he represented everything they disliked about outsiders. He thought about the comments, the headlines, the viral clips. It was strange how easily people could turn a story into a symbol. But symbols never tell the full truth. One evening, a knock at the gate broke his thoughts. When he walked over, he saw Dolores Hinton standing there with a small casserole dish. "You looked like you could use a good meal," she said with a warm smile. Roland laughed softly. "You didn't have to do that." "Maybe not," she said, handing it through the fence. "But after what you went through, you earned a decent dinner." They talked for a bit, about the weather, about her garden, about how quiet things had gotten since Colleen's fall from grace. Then Dolores said something that stuck with him. "It's funny," she said, "how people fight the hardest for things they didn't build. Maybe that's because they don't know what it takes to create something real." Roland nodded. "Or maybe they've never lost something real." She smiled, gave his arm a gentle pat, and headed back down the hill. That night, Roland sat on the porch, eating Dolores's casserole straight from the dish, watching the lights fade over the ridge. The air was cool, the kind that carried no bitterness, no tension, just space to breathe. He thought about what the house had taught him. That ownership isn't just a line on a document. It's a relationship between effort and belonging. You don't truly own something unless you've invested part of yourself into it, your time, your sweat, your patience. And maybe that was the lesson he needed all along. He'd built the house with his hands, but the experience had rebuilt something inside him too. His sense of trust, his understanding of control, and his ability to let go. He realized that sometimes people like Colleen weren't just obstacles. They were mirrors, reflecting the parts of the world that still needed fixing. As he leaned back in his chair, the night insects starting their steady chorus, Roland spoke softly, almost like a prayer. "Let this place stay honest. Let it stay mine, not just on paper, but in spirit." He reached for his phone, opened the camera, and recorded one last video. This time there was no anger in his voice, just calm. "This is for anyone who's ever built something only to have it challenged," he said. "Don't give up. Don't let noise or pride take away what's rightfully yours. Because the real victory isn't getting it back. It's knowing you never truly lost it." He ended the video with a quiet smile and set the phone down beside him. Above him, the stars blinked faintly through the trees, and for the first time in months, the mountain felt alive again. Not because it was his, but because it finally felt whole. Respect what isn't yours. Protect what you've earned. Because when you build something with integrity, no one can truly take it away. If this story moved you, remember to subscribe for more real human stories that remind us what perseverance and truth look like in today's world. Your support helps keep these voices alive.